I went to Annecy's Film Festival this year as a journalist and got to preview a lot of things. Two of which I'll be focusing on in this video are Science Saru's Summer 2026 releases, Jaadugar, A Witch in Mongolia, and The Ghost in the Shell. Both series directors Abel Gongora and Moko-chan have had a lot of crossover throughout the years, and of course have worked under Naoko Yamada, the chief director for Mongolia. I wanted to take a look at these directors' earlier works to try to get a feel for their style and how it shapes the identity of their current projects. In the case of Gongora, where he helmed projects himself like his series directorial debut with Scott Pilgrim Takes Off in 2023, and in the case of Moko-chan, where his episode direction under other amazing creatives before his own series directorial debut this July. Episode direction is the best indicator for aesthetics, as it is probably the first time the artist takes on a level of responsibility to quote-unquote own the whole episode while still adhering to the series director's vision. The synergy that arises from this sort of collaboration yields a definition of what this creator becomes known for directorially. I'd argue that while storyboarding is the foundation for animation itself, it passes through so many hands that build upon it, whereas episode direction is one of the final passes before the product gets presented to the public. In addition, something like directing an OP or an ED is somewhat small scale production-wise, as it might have been taking place separately or even concurrently with the episode productions themselves, that you can almost treat it like a music video. Hence, episode direction is the primary source that defines these directors going forward. That being said, Abel Gongora doesn't actually have that many credits as episode direction before he is in charge of his own series, with Scott Pilgrim Takes Off. So we kind of have to look at a certain interesting anthology series, Star Wars Visions. This first volume of the anthology released back in 2021 as Disney's first formal venture into the anime space via Star Wars, where Science Saru produced 2 out of the 9 episodes. Episode 9 was directed by co-founder Yoon Young Choi, and episode 6, titled T0B1, was Abel Gongora's episode directorial debut. Gongora is one of the 5 starting staff at Science Saru, with Masaki Yuasa, who created my favorite anime, as the other co-founder with Choi. Gongora worked under Choi's studio Ankama Tokyo division, where he met and stayed in contact with Yuasa until working on Ping Pong, the animation. He's known for the hero sequences, which are highly texturized and reused across the entire anime, thematically tying the 2 main characters about their idea of heroism. This watercolor-like aesthetic is carried into Gongora's Star Wars episode as well. Even with the amount of creative freedom of the anthology itself, maybe one of the real constraints was time, as all of these episodes were under 20 minutes, with Gongora's coming in around 12 minutes, close to maybe half the length of a traditional anime episode, while still being longer than, an OP and ED, which are 90 seconds respectively. I've only seen 4 of these when it first came out, and Gongora's was not one of them, so I got the chance to watch his episode after seeing Mongolia's episode 1 on the big screen in Annecy, so all my thoughts are contextualized with the presence of Mongolia. The backgrounds in Visions have this sort of fraying edge texture akin to watercolor again, but Gongora plays with this via transitions and has multiple different textures interacting with each other. In the final fight, lightning is the main element that is used as the TIE fighter blends in with the clouds or when they clash with their sabers. Toby doing the research in the lab at the beginning is almost very reminiscent to Satara in the new Mongolia show, as learning that takes place interacts with the world around the character as well. Also, the background aesthetic in Mongolia takes on a new distinct flavor compared to Gongora's other work, with the presence of these brown specks that feel like sand, which is stuck to everything, from the character's line work to the buildings around them, very indicative to the landscape that the work is set in. This, combined with the lack of black outlines for the characters and the removal of shadows stated by character designer Kenichi Yoshida, creates even less of a barrier between the characters and the setting itself. That being said, shadows are used, but they're used extremely intentionally, like Shitara having the shadows of the windows kind of representing the cage that she's placed in. We can see some of Abel's other works, especially with the OPs, as the Line work for the character outlines are changed from black to like bright neon colors in Eizouken, and of course the very color-oriented Dandadan Season 1's OP. Both of these OPs features the same interactions of multiple textures that Gongora has a knack for to convey the thematic storytelling of their respective series, with Eizouken's story focusing on the production of anime, and Dandadan's amalgamation of supernatural elements into a very hosh-posh narrative. Gongora's series directorial debut is a very interesting one. Scott Pilgrim as a franchise is very anime-coded, as the director of the comic, Brian Lee O'Malley, grew up watching 90s anime. Takes Off, that came out in 2023, is almost like an anime-inspired Western comic turned into a Western-inspired anime. Pretty cool for Science Saru's multicultural staff to take part in this project. Outside of the music that the showrunner specifically hired for, Gongora was trusted to handle the rest. I see the little nod to Yuasa's Tatami Galaxy's first episode with the robotic movement of the both main characters. Outside of that, his first episode is pretty safe to say the least, but I feel that was very intentional since the end of the episode is where the real twist lies, which lends to the rest of the series to explode in creativity. So yeah, actually, Scott Pilgrim is the real crossover between Abel Gongora and Moko-chan. Moko-chan did the majority of the OP, while Gongora is credited with the photography. The strumming reminds me of the Fulikuli ED, and Envy's posters looks a lot like that scene from the new Blade Runner. But to complement the guitar on the right side of the screen is the drums beating into the frame, as well to indicate how integral music is to the franchise as a whole. Episode 3's storyboard and episode direction does feel more in line with Moko-chan's style. Moko-chan and Gongora worked on 2 consecutive Dandadan episodes in Season 1, although Gongora's part in the latter's Episode 5 is just layout supervision, which is pretty hard to decipher what is his, but Moko-chan in Episode 4 takes on a lot of roles. Storyboard, episode direction, sub-character design, and prop design. This bookend to the first multi-episode arc in the show is put into Moko-chan's hands. The whole can starting the race scene in the B part of the episode is such a blast to watch. On top of that, Moko-chan is credited as the assistant director for pretty much every episode in the first core of Dandadan, as this is equally his baby as it is Yamashiro's, while Gongora took the helm as director for Core 2, but neither of them really seem to have done any episodes outside of Gongora's a little deeper involvement for Episode 2 of the second season. But yeah, outside of all this, Moko-chan has prior credits that we've been saving for his episode directorial and storyboard debut in Heike Monogatari Episode 5, who Naoko Yamada helms the series director role, and Tatami Time Machine Blues Episode 3 with Shingo Natsume, who stands as the series director, where both of these works were created under Science Saru. Heike is pretty special since it marked Naoko Yamada's departure from her tenure with Kyoto Animation and her now prolonged collaboration with Science Saru, whereas Tatami Time Machine Blues is a sequel to Masaki Yuasa's Tatami Galaxy almost 12 years later, and comes 1 year after the first volume of the Star Wars anthology, which both are streamed exclusively on the Disney Plus platform outside of a theatrical release in Japan. The episode lengths in response are very varied, with all the episodes outside of maybe episode 1 running for a total of 18 minutes. It's actually really cool to look back at my own catalog of videos and seeing that I've already covered this episode to some extent 4 years ago. Both these episodes by Moko-chan really highlight his level of controlling the pace of the narrative with still frame. Now, usually when you hear someone talking about still frames, especially when it comes to modern anime, it holds a negative connotation, as in, oh, they don't have enough budget, so all they can do is still frames, which is not remotely what I'm trying to imply. In this case, Moko-chan is choosing to use this technique as a means to convey the story. Let's take Heike Episode 5, for example. This is a turning point in the story where the Heike clan actually sees control of everything, which crescendos into this B-part fight on the bridge, which is just, I mean, beautiful. There's a sliding pan with the loss of focus via the arrow and the strumming to show the reality of the war. This, coupled with the slow motion in the river, really lends to some beautiful shots of the severity of the whole incident. Just, Moko-chan is so good. It's almost like a camera is taking all of this in, with the eye as the witness for all of this, as a petal shatters in contrast to the fall leaves that are shown at the end of the episode. This is very reminiscent to Yamada's style in mimicking focal length in animation shots, which is exactly why the final episode of Heike is a shared storyboard credit of Moko-chan and Yamada, with Yamada as the episode director. Generally, with shared boards, it's most likely a split between the A part and the B part, and I'm making the assumption that Moko-chan boards the former while Yamada boards the latter, as the change is around the 13 to 14 minute mark in the episode, as the same flower from episode 5 is used to symbolize the end of the Heike's reign here in this moment. And this is all picked up from Yamada as it gets come together with the strings of fate coming together with Tokuko's hands, and time rewinds for the same petals going back to buds as this Heike Monogatari is told from the beginning once again. With Tatami Time Machine Blues, Moko-chan is responsible for the middle, episode 3 out of the 5 episodes, and this is my favorite section for a multitude of reasons. Tatami Blues is very narratively focused and relies on the audience's understanding of these characters from their past iterations, but this episode is where the threads that have been established in the first chunk pays dividends for people that are really, paying attention. Moko-chan has a sequence where Ozu is scheming his way out of the bathhouse, and the shutter-like sound where Ozu is posed in a Kanada style is just so much fun. This coupled with a sliding bridge scene where Watashi chases Ozu is an interesting mix of still frames in the foreground while using those to show progression in the background, ending in a callback to previous works such as Akashi walking like the Night is Short movie, or the aspect ratio shrinking as the more cynical Watashi thinks about other couples having the time of their lives under the bridge. Here is where the color design is on full blast for this final part of the episode. The blues in Tatami Blues are here in full focus as Watashi tails himself fumbling the bag and combating Ozu at the same time to no avail. Seeing the sunlight of hope cut into the depressive blues really encapsulates what Watashi's whole struggle is like, and the reason why he ends up looping in the original series in Galaxy. Usually he just blames Ozu for his troubles, but here, seeing his old self, he really can't deny the reality that his own self-sabotaging failure of seizing that opportunity right in front of him. Now, shall we get to the Ghost in the Shell part finally? Have I rambled on enough about Moko-chan's past works? This is a very unique presence at Annecy because it's the first time that a TV series was screened in the special events category of the festival. It got a primetime slot in basically the first main day of the festival, Monday, 9:30 a.m., where there was a panel talking about the production of the show, followed by the world premiere of the first 2 episodes in the English dub. Since this was my first event at Annecy, like the first thing that we went to, I was very ill prepared because even though I got a reservation and arrived 30 minutes before the showing, there was a line that literally wrapped all around the main Bonlu building, and I ended up getting one of the last seats in the far back row. This shit is crazy. I mean, it's Ghost in the Shell, right? Huge IP with so many entries into the franchise, and Moko-chan is currently in the center of it. Bandai Filmworks is who pitched this entry of Ghost to Science Saru, while Jaadugar was requested by the mangaka via TV Ahashi. With about 80 members of the studio split amongst at least these 2 works, but they're probably definitely making more than that. What's interesting is that Moko-chan is actually credited for the storyboard for pretty much every episode that is released thus far, but only with episode 1 is he the solo storyboard and episode director. And when you have 3 storyboard credits for 1 episode, and usually just only 2 parts or sections of the episode, I have no idea who is working on what, so I'll just focus on episode 1 itself. While watching that episode at Annecy, I could really tell that it was done by Moko-chan because the use of red was used pretty beautifully done, especially the panning of the light into the staircase that tied into the falling scene by Mokoto with the car lens lights flaring as well. Of course, this particular scene is also seen in Oshii's rendition, but it's not really fair to compare the 2 works because Moko-chan himself experienced both Oshii's work and the original manga around the same time back in the day. This work goes back to Masamune's baseline and accentuates the source material to another level while staying as true as possible. Of course, if you've seen even the first episode at this point, I mean, you can tell, right? You can see how expressive our main character is. I mean, look at her hair, it's blue. Moko-chan explained that about 15 animators animators were involved in the first episode and talked about recreating the volume cover into anime form with cut number 75. He walked us through the sequence of production from storyboard, which is the blueprint, to layout, where the character expressions and movements are conveyed, to the episode director, where it goes for corrections. And in this case, Moko-chan wanted Makoto's back to be more rounder and more in a fetal position while she was in maintenance, with more tubes coming out of her back. This is also where lighting for the shot is kind of determined, and since she was on glass, Moko-chan wanted the light to come up from below her through that pane as well. Then it gets turned into Genga, or key animation, and then in between, or second animation, is produced to fill the bridge between keyframes. The animation director can come in at any point to provide corrections before it is sent off to processing via compositing with After Effects and background art. What's interesting about Science Saru's workflow is the use of color scripts in the pre-production. For Ghost in the Shell, this is done by Sophie Lee, who also did it for Gongora Scott Pilgrim. Here's an example of the color script for Moko-chan's episode 3 in that show, which we talked about earlier. Moko-chan even has a credit for color scripting for Scott Pilgrim's OP. He stated in the panel that episode 4's color scripting is primarily black, white, and red, whereas episode 5, which just aired this week as this video is coming out, with the colors blue, white, and gray, and that's how they convey the narrative. Since this is done during the pre-production phase, it just gives a framework on which story beats are connected thematically via colors, scene by scene, episode by episode. Obviously, because this is done so far in advance, by the time it gets to the final product, those colors might not be as prominent as they were, but whoever goes through each of the steps can look back and see, oh, like this scene is connected to this, one way or the other. On top of this, Satoshi Hashimoto did the color design, who also worked closely with Satoshi Kon, where they ended up, in this case, turning up the saturation while lessening the brightness so that the overall color scheme is a little bit darker than the average anime. 3D CG plays a big role in the anime, especially with the Fujikomas, but it's also very seamless in this anime. Check out this clip. I wouldn't have known that this was CG involved because of how well it's meshed with the traditional animation on the screen. One of the big themes of the manga is a lack of distinction between machines and living things, and that needed to come through in the art as well. So using 3D to aid in this, as Moko-chan described, that when people draw, we enjoy creating movement that is illogical, right? This illusion is actually created by the animators themselves, since nothing actually is moving in 2D. 3D graphics are mathematical and very logical, so the interplay between these two techniques results in something unique, yet still true to the source. An example of this interplay that he mentioned was the cyber hacking sequence, where the 3D CG was used for the background, but the dynamic character movement is all hand-drawn. It's interesting to think about the distribution for both series, since Jaadugar's screening at Annecy was sandwiched inside a bunch of submissions that were competing for the TV anime category. So only one episode was shown, even though that first episode was just half of the pilot, as a 2-episode premiere that had Gongora in charge of the first episode and Yamada in charge of the second episode, released for the actual premiere via Crunchyroll. Whereas Ghost premiered at Annecy with 2 episodes, but the global release via Amazon released it week by week instead of lumping it together. We can still tell that, the first 2 episodes kind of tell a story together and are supposed to be packaged together as a whole, because episode 3's Avant, done by Bahi JD, provides a similar bombastic celebration of action and animation to the Avant for Moko-chan's episode 1 as well. There's probably so much more that I could talk about, like episodes 4 material that was the foundation for Oshi's Innocence movie, but I will continue to enjoy the rest of this anime and Jaadugar as well to the fullest in the week-to-week format before dissecting it in any kind of way once the final product is completed. All of this was not possible if Annecy's Film Festival did not approve my press badge application, so of course there's some bias. Like, I got to see this early, I got to see this in France, it was a lot of fun for me, so of course I'm gonna be biased in some way. But I will fly to the end of the world to see Naoka Yamada anywhere. During the same day of the Ghost in the Shell panel, there was a signing session with all 4 that represented Ghost in the Shell at 4 p.m. I kind of showed up to the Bonlu an hour early since the morning line was so crazy, and Moko-chan realistically could only sign so many autographs in like the given hour and a half time slot. And there was a previous signing, so I didn't see a line. I was like, oh, maybe maybe Moko-chan's not that, not that popular. But I decided to take a lap around like 30 minutes later, 30 minutes before the actual signing, and then I found that the sign-up line was actually outside the Bonlu in like extreme there was like a heat wave going on the entire week I was there. So I again ended up being one of the last people to see Moko-chan. I had my flyer with me that was handed out to everyone. Hold on. To everyone that kind of like went to the panel in the morning, and this was done by the character designer Shuhei Honda. One of the traditions of Annecy's Film Festival is to like fly paper airplanes towards the screen. They even give instructions on how to do it with this poster. But, you know, not knowing what kind of shikishi boards that they could have provided for the signing, like the information for any kind of signings, I really couldn't find online. So I had kept mine in pristine conditions without any wrinkles all day just in case, because I was like, yeah, like who knows, maybe like, do I need to buy a volume or something like that to get that signed from Moko-chan? So I just did not know. Thankfully, they had reproductions of the key visual at the signing itself, so it's safe to say, as you can see, this flyer did not make it through the travel from France all the way back home with me, you know, which to be expected. You could see the actual signing itself in the first section of this video that I filmed back home. I will eventually get a frame for it down the line and then hang it to its eternity, because it's a representation of me being able to meet Moko-chan. And I got to tell him that his bridge sequence for that Tatami Blues episode was so amazing, and I got to say it to his face in person in very broken Japanese, to say the least. I mean, this is someone that I've been following for maybe 4 years at this point, and I never thought I would actually meet someone like this in person. So Annecy was such a blast creatively to be able to interact with these professionals in a very casual setting. Like, this is something that I never thought I would be able to do. The idea of the ghost being our, you know, consciousness and the physical body as our shell in humans is played upon in so many ways in the series, and will continue to be as we, you know, look upon all the different ways in the franchise itself. This flyer as well, even if it gets beaten up throughout all its travels across miles and times, can its ghost still be able to fly strong and true?